can see, a very special day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 5 of the Kitchen Sink podcast. It's just me today, no guest, which hasn't been done since the first episode of this podcast. But there's been something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and something that I don't think a lot of people, especially filmmakers, really talk about. And if you read the title, you know what I'm going to be talking about today. And that is dealing with depression and anxiety as a filmmaker. But before I get into that, I just want to say, you know, people who give advice for filmmakers, and this might be quite ironic because this whole podcast, the whole point of it is to set you guys up for success, even though I'm not necessarily that big in the film world. I'm still a filmmaker, and, you know, I bring on my filmmaker friends and we try to get through this together, and we try and give as much advice as we can. But here's the thing, though. I've come to realize that advice is really just one of those things that doesn't really make anything happen, because as filmmakers, you know, we always look up advice and we always want to hear that magical piece of advice that just kicks everything into gear for us, and that makes us that lights a fire under us and makes us want to just go out and conquer the world. Like, yes, that piece of advice solved my problems and I can do anything now. We look it up on YouTube, we see professional filmmakers that are legends, and we hear their advice pretty much every time they're interviewed. People ask them, what advice do you give to young filmmakers or people trying to break into the film industry? And it's always like this nebulous sort of work hard, keep doing it. And a lot of that is true. Actually, pretty much all of that is true. You have to work hard. You have to keep going at it. You can't give up. But at the same time, there's something there that I feel like is never really mentioned. The other day, I went to a filmmaking seminar from Kent Lamb, the Standard Story Company. I attended a filmmaking seminar online, and, you know, a lot of it was very much just don't be stagnant, don't do it all yourself, go out, network, basically just work hard and try to achieve your goals, you know, very standard stuff that you hear all the time. And it got me thinking, I'm like, you know, that's a lot easier said than done for someone who doesn't struggle with mental health issues. And I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm just saying a lot of people, if they do, don't really mention that part of it, because the reality is, if you're a filmmaker trying to make it in this business and trying to make art, not even the business side, just the art side of it, the mental health part of it is going to be an obstacle for you. Depression and anxiety are going to be huge hurdles for you to get across, and no one really ever seems to mention that. The sad reality is, at least not for everybody, but for me especially, and for a lot of other people I've talked to, it's a lot harder for us to get our art done, whether it be just the art side or the business side, trying to break into the industry, making moves, when you struggle with your mental health. When you struggle with depression and anxiety or any other mental health issue, it's a lot harder to make art, to break into the industry. And that's something that no one really talks about. I struggle with my own mental health issues. I'll just admit it right now. And I really want to talk about it. Now, before we get into it, I just want to say, what do I mean by depression and anxiety or mental health? Because a lot of these phrases now, unfortunately, in the world we live in today, are just sort of thrown around with little to no meaning. They're just thrown around like candy they're used so much that they almost lose their meaning. When people are sad that their football team lost, they say, oh man, I'm depressed. When people are nervous for a first date, they say, oh, I'm anxious, I have anxiety. This is not first day jitters. This is not first day of school, first day of work jitters. Anxiety is a crippling disease. Same thing with depression. And people do it with a bunch of other mental illnesses like ADHD. Like, oh yeah, my ADHD is kicking in, or OCD especially. Oh man, I'm so OCD. Let me tell you something. You're not OCD. If your life is not being ruined by said OCD, you don't have OCD. This is the type of stuff that really affects your quality of life. This is not, I'm nervous. This is, I'm so anxious that I'm scared to leave the house type stuff. That's the type of anxiety and depression I'm talking about. I'm talking about the stuff that really affects your quality of life and your mental standing. Because that's the type of stuff that a lot of us have to go through. A lot of us as filmmakers have to go through this, including myself, who struggles with depression, anxiety, and OCD. I'm not throwing those terms around lightly. I've done a lot of work to try and overcome these things. And regardless of what the outside world tries to keep pushing that bad stuff back into my soul, I have to resist it. But the thing is that life pulls no punches. And the more that life pushes that negativity down your throat, it's a lot of energy to push back. And at the end of the day, you don't have a lot of energy to do your art or try to make steps into the film world. And that's a struggle. I think 2 podcasts ago, episode 3, I talked to my friend Chris Mack, and he kind of mentioned it. He said, he mentioned that it's harder if people struggle with depression and anxiety, and he's lived a very blessed life because he doesn't really struggle with that. So I'm glad he brought it up, but I just wanted to expand on it, and say that, yeah, it's true. It's a lot harder. There's this unknown fear inside of you that you can't necessarily pinpoint within yourself. I want to start this project, but it's so hard. I can't do it. There's always this voice in your head telling you that you can't do it. And the voice can be crippling. It's not just, oh, I don't know if I can do it, like your typical doubt. It's like a crippling voice that's screaming at you, telling you you're not good enough. You're not going to do it. You're not going to be successful. It's very hard. And the thing that I really have sympathy for and empathy for is people who have that going on the inside, but then also have people on the outside coming at them saying, you need to get a real job. You're never going to make it in this industry. You need to be more realistic. You need to be more practical, all that stuff. And it's 10 times harder, and I don't really have that problem on the external side as maybe a couple people here and there, but for the most part, I don't have people coming at me and telling me my dream is a waste of time and that I should get a quote unquote real job and that I'm never going to make it in the industry. But I tell myself that so much to the point where it shuts me down. It's hard. It is so, so hard to rejuvenate yourself and get back up and do the art that you want to do. For me, the anxiety that also stops me from creating art is the fact that I have kind of like a social anxiety as well. Talking to new people, I'm a very quiet guy. I'd like to consider myself a quiet guy. I'm slow to speak. I don't necessarily talk to people unless I'm spoken to. And that's why networking is so hard. So that anxiety is what is hindering me from networking. So what do I do instead? Instead, I try to do everything myself, and then I suffer even more from it because you can't do everything by yourself. Even the pioneers of guerrilla filmmaking and mariachi filmmaking like Robert Rodriguez, they don't do everything themselves. They don't. There's a lot of people on those sets. He wears many hats, but he's not doing everything. He's not acting, cinematographer, director, editor, grip, makeup. He's not everything. Maybe sometimes he is, like on El Mariachi, where he made that film for $7,000, and Red 11, where he did it again for $7,000. That's a little different. But at the end of the day, for something like Alita Battle Angel, you bet your ass that he has a lot of people on set helping him. So it's a lot harder for people with social anxiety or people who are depressed to make those connections. And when you don't make those connections, unfortunately, it's a lot harder to get your artwork done. And I'm saying this as someone who has not really overcome this problem yet. I still struggle with depression. I still struggle with anxiety and OCD and mental illness is no joke. And my other friends struggle from it as well. And there is this fear of starting. A lot of people like to call people who are stagnant right now in terms of their filmmaking or in terms of any career, really. They're like, oh, you're lazy. You're lazy. Millennials are lazy. Gen Zs are lazy. Yes, there are lazy people out there. There's been lazy people in every generation since the beginning of time. People are lazy. But to me, laziness is someone who intentionally doesn't do work because they don't want to do it and because they just want to sit around and relax all the time with no responsibility. That's not me. I want to do work. I work hard when it's something I love to do. My problem is not laziness. And even though I have told myself this, like, oh, I'm lazy, I'm terrible, like I need to stop being so lazy. It's not laziness. And I've come to that realization. It's fear. You're not lazy. And I'm talking to you guys now. If you guys think you're lazy, you're not lazy. The only way you are lazy, if you say, I don't want to do that, I just want to dick around and have fun. I don't really want to work because I don't like working. But most of us are saying, no, it's not that we don't want to work. It's that we want to work the jobs that fulfill us, the jobs that make us happy. And I know that you have to climb the ladder and go through all the shit jobs in order to get, to where you want. I understand that. But at the same time, it's easier said than done for people who are mentally healthy. If you're watching this podcast saying, well, you got to work hard, oh, you're just lazy, then you're probably mentally healthy. Okay, because you don't understand the toll that this fear takes. Now, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but what I'm saying is I'm talking to you guys, going back to you guys. If you think you're lazy, but you want to work, it's not laziness. It's fear. It's fear of commitment and fear of failure and fear of change. Those three things are the biggest problem. And I am still trying to figure those things out. Change terrifies me. I know I got to move out of where I'm at, what state I'm in. I know I got to move out of here. I know I have to go up to people and make more strides and talk to people and make more connections. I know I have to do that. I know that I'm going to get rejected a billion times before I get an acceptance or a project that's accepted. You're going to get 1,000 no's before you get one yes. More than that. You'll get 10,000 no's sometimes. 1,000,000 no's. Who knows? Before you get one yes. And then obviously the fear of commitment. Now you're like, oh, but fear of commitment, isn't that just being lazy? No. People, as human beings, we like comfortability. Making yourself uncomfortable is a natural fear to have. No one goes into something that's going to change their life or redirect the course of their life with no fear. That's just not true. And if you say that you did that, then A, good for you, and B, I don't believe you. You're never going to talk to anybody who has to commit to a child because they're having their first baby or has to commit to a marriage and they're going to be married for the rest of their life. Any giant commitment like that, buying a house or anything, it's a scary thing. So it's fear of commitment, fear of change, and fear of rejection. You're not lazy. It's those three things. And again, it's easier said than done. I will be honest. It's hard for me to think that way sometimes. I don't have it all figured out. I still struggle with the fact I'm like, oh, I'm lazy. I'm never going to make it. I still struggle with that stuff. I do. I still go to bed at night thinking, man, I got nothing done today. I just did my shitty day job and got none of my work done. Meanwhile, all my friends are going out there, and then you start comparing yourself to your friends, which is a whole nother can of worms. But I've done that and I still do that. And I need to learn not to, but it's so hard. And I cannot express to you how hard it truly is. Because I can say these things and you can agree with them, but putting these words into practice is 10 times harder. To overcome your mental hurdles and step out of your comfort zone is an extremely hard thing to do. Talking to new actors, emailing producers over and over again, trying to pitch your scripts to people, trying to pitch your movies to investors. These are nerve-wracking things. Pitching your movie to a studio only to have them ghost you or only to have them reject you. That is a constant beating on your self-esteem, on your confidence. It's hard. Now, I'm here to tell you straight up that it's not all doom and gloom here. You can overcome this, and people have overcome this. I'm still in the process of trying to, and I think one of the steps that I have to take is doing this podcast. I've come to realize that one thing I do is I always wait for the quote unquote right time to do something. And at the end of the day, there is no right time to do something, quote unquote. You just have to do it. Like, I've been putting this podcast off because I'm not really feeling it. I don't really feel like talking right now. talking is exhausting for me, which it is. At the end of the day, I'm just like, you know what? I have to do this because if I don't do it right now, if I don't do it right now today, then I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get it done because there's that doubt, that seed of doubt is always going to be planted there. So I'm just not going to do it because A, I'm scared, and B, it takes me out of my comfort zone. Humans like routine even when they don't like routine. And anything that breaks routine is scary. In this field, I want to do my art and kind of, even if I'm working on the same project, do something kind of different every day, you know, or at least kind of change things up every once in a while, which in a lot of jobs you can't do. So anything that breaks routine is scary for people. Subconsciously, consciously, whatever you want to say. Hopefully this isn't just word salad, but my point is that there is no right time to do something. You have to just do it. And again, I stress to you, I understand that it's easier said than done. My microphone is dipping, so I'm just going to readjust this real quick. There you go. And I can say this all day long, but at the end of the day, putting it into practice, like I said before, it's not easy. It's actually one of the hardest things you have to do as a filmmaker struggling with mental health issues. There's this crippling weight upon you that's preventing you from creating your art or not going into the thing you want to go to, or the passion that you want to strive toward. There's a thing that is constantly holding you back. And a lot of people and a lot of filmmakers never mention it. It's like, oh, work hard, make connections, do this, do that. It's like, yeah, it's easy. But when you're mentally ill, that's not easy. It's actually extremely difficult. And I just hope that this podcast, you know, sheds some light on that. I kind of went on a tangent and I forgot if I started a point that I never ended up finishing, but because it's something, mental health in general is something that people don't necessarily talk about, and people throw around these terms, but they don't necessarily understand it. And now we're coming into a generation that one good thing I can say about the recent generations is that we understand mental health. The previous generations, you know, the greatest generation, the boomers, the Gen Xers, you know, they don't necessarily or the silent generation, rather, greatest generation, I think it's like 1912. I meant to say silent generation. Silent generation, boomers and Gen X, you know, they have a hard time understanding what mental health really is, even though I hear stories all the time of these people experiencing it. And it's rough. And no matter what you do, no matter what job you strive to do, if you suffer from a mental illness, it is harder for you to do it. It is harder for you than the average person to get out of bed, to go to work, to strive to the point where you want to be. It's hard. And that hard is actually an understatement. There are some days where it's crippling. And I have friends who they've woken up some mornings and they're just like, I can't do it anymore. I've done that too, where I've woken up and I'm like, I can't do this, you know? And at the end of the day, there's someone next to you who wakes up and they're like, man, I hate my job, but you know what? Another day, another dollar. I just got to do it. And it's like, yeah, we all have to do it, John. You know what I mean? It's like, we all have to do it. Okay. It's like, but artists' minds work different. They work differently and it sucks. It's a curse. I'm not saying that as like a good thing. Like, oh, I'm different than you because I think like an artist. No. Thinking like an artist sucks sometimes because you're just so emotional and it's hard to separate your worth from your art that you do. And that's a whole nother discussion. It's hard for us. Okay. But actually, you know what? I'm going to go back and say that when I said it's another discussion, I actually just real quickly want to touch on that. Your art doesn't define your self-worth. I actually do want to talk about that because that's true. As artists, it's really hard for us to separate our self-worth from our art. It's like, oh, this art isn't good, so I'm a piece of shit. I'm terrible. I'm untalented. I'm not smart. You know, that type of self-deprecation and negative talk runs rampant through your mind when a piece of your art fails or when someone rejects it or whatever. Or if you're, in my case, if you're just not making enough of it, it's hard. It's hard not to have that reflected back on your own self-worth because you feel like absolute garbage when you're not making enough or you make a piece of art that's not up to your standards or anything like that. But my friend told me recently, he's like, it took him a long time. He said it took him a long time to understand that your art is separate from your value. The value of your art is not equal to your value as a person. We are all people who struggle, and we're all people on this rock at the end of the day who are trying to get to where we want to go. And I'm not trying to get all philosophical on you, but to go back to my point, don't let any failure dictate your self-worth, because I've done that. I'm not remotely where I want to be in this industry. I'm stuck in a state that has no real film program. I'm stuck at a job where I get paid okay, and the job's not necessarily hard. I don't hate my day job, but it's not where I want to be. And for your average blue collar, person, that's good enough for them. They make their money, they contribute what they want to contribute to society, and that's it. That's it for them. But for artists, including me, that's a lot harder to accept, because being an artist, it's like a drug. It's like and the more we don't do our art, it's like withdrawal. The more time you spend not doing your art, like the more anxious you almost get, because you just want to let it out. You literally go through withdrawal, and it sucks. It's like the artist's curse. I hate it. And any artist who's like, oh yeah, I actually kind of like that, don't believe them, because it sucks. But anyway, please, and again, it's easier said than it is to put in practice, but don't let the value of your art determine your value as a person. That's so hard. My friend is an artist as well. He's a 3D artist, photographer, musician. He's one of the most artistic people I know. I love the guy. He's my best friend, but it's kind of annoying because he's pretty much good at anything he does. Like, he's like, you know what? I'm going to try this. And then he's just good at it. I'm just kidding, Nick. I'm just kidding. It's no, he studies it for hours and hours and hours a day until he basically masters it. But he's just really good at that. He's much better at it than I am. But anyway, he told me recently a story about how he was at a place in his life where on paper he achieved everything he ever wanted. He was in a touring band that was pretty successful, and he was a full-time photographer. He told me that was his life goal for years, to be a full-time photographer and be in a touring band. And he was there. He was there, and he still didn't feel fulfilled. And then he told me a quote by, I think, Jim Carrey, who said, I wish everyone on earth could get $1 million just to show them that it truly won't make them happy. Because once he made it there, he realized, I'm still not fulfilled. So he found fulfillment in his other things, like his family. He started a family, and that's cool, And I think I struggle with that so much because I'm trying so hard to find my purpose outside of my art. And the last thing I want to do is deify art and make it my entire personality and just make it who I am. And I do nothing but that. That's not what I want to do. That's not what anyone should want to do. And that goes back to the mental health thing. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your mental health to constantly put that weight on your shoulders. And again, I go to therapy. It's hard. I talk about this with my therapist all the time. And I'm sure she's sick of hearing the same thing over and over again. It's like, I'm too scared to jump. I'm too scared to jump. It's like, at the end of the day, just jump. Just fucking jump. Like, I'm sure like my therapist wants to be like, you've been coming in here for years talking about this shit. At the end of the day, you're going to have to be the one to jump. So just jump. My therapist does not actually talk to me like that. I was just being funny. I just want to point that out. But yeah, it's like, I've been trying to jump for so long, but that anxiety is so crippling that it's not that I can't do it. It's that I won't do it. I'm too scared to do it. Can I do it? Yes. But will I do it? No. Why? Because I'm too scared. And where does that fear come from? It comes from my anxiety and my depression, my OCD, my ADHD, whatever you have, you know, whatever mental illness that you genuinely have, not a quote unquote mental illness that you say you have because you just throw it around because you're like, oh, I like things in a certain order. I must be OCD. Or, oh, I have a hard time paying attention in math class. I must be ADHD. Or, man, I get sad sometimes. I must be depressed. No. My friend also told me this the other day as we were talking on the phone during that same conversation. He went through, as an artist, he went through a very depressive period himself. And he said something that really interested me. He said, depression is, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, depression is tricky because at a certain point in time, he didn't think he was depressed. He just thought he got depressed. He just thought he got depression. He didn't think he was depressed. And then he realized, oh, wait, no, I am depressed, to the point where he could not function. And I've been there too. I've been depressed, anxious, whatever, to the point where I cannot function. And people, and I used to be one of these people. I will admit it. And I'm ashamed that I used to be like this. I used to be one of those people that don't really get it. I'm like anxious. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're just nervous? Get over it. I used to be one of those people. Like, I didn't understand what anxiety was because I never really experienced it myself. But then through life events and through all this different stuff, I started to experience real anxiety. And let me tell you something, that changed my mind very quick, very, very quick. It's easy sometimes when you have never experienced something like that to not truly understand how crippling it really is. And at the end of the day, there's a part of me that thinks I don't think anyone can truly understand unless you go through it. Because again, I used to be that guy. It's like depression. Well, I mean, everyone gets sad. You know, just get over it. Have ice cream. Go get some McDonald's. You'll be fine. No. It's like, oh, anxiety. Oh, trust me. I've felt anxious before. I'm always anxious on a first date, first day of school, you know, first day on the job. Yeah, no. There's a difference between being nervous and being anxious to the point where you have to be hospitalized because you have panic attacks, you know? And people, and I'm not pointing fingers because it's not just the older generation, but a lot of people, especially in the older generation, they don't understand it. I don't exactly know why. I can dive deep into why I think things are getting worse with people's mental health. A lot of it is very biblically has a biblical precedent to it. It has a central biblical unit to it because I am a man of faith, and I think what dictates our behavior and the way we act is tied to our faith or lack thereof. And but I don't want to get into that too much. But I will say that one thing that has always stuck with me is my devotion to God and Jesus Christ. And that's wavered too sometimes. You're not going to be 100% faithful 100% of the time. It's hard. And God understands that, and the Bible understands that. And I'm sorry if me bringing up God and Jesus makes you uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, that uncomfortableness that you're feeling is the original sin. That kind of like uncomfortable, like, that kind of feeling you get when people mention the name of Jesus, that's the original sin inside of you. The more I think we separate faith from our virtue, and the more we separate faith from our purpose, I think we lose a lot of what makes us human. And I truly think that people finding purpose in their faith and in God outside of what they have, or outside of what they think, outside of the worldly things that we've been trying to put our value into, like our art, I think you'll be a lot more happy. And again, I said this 100 times during this podcast, and I'm going to say it 100 times more. I still struggle with this. I put my purpose in my art way too much, and I struggle with that. And I've been praying about it a lot because I know at the end of the day, my art is not more important than my family, than my friends, than my pets, my duggies, than even my enemies, humans, human life, love, your faith, your hope. Your art is not more important than those things. It's not more important than your family. It's not more important than your health, mentally or physically. But as artists, that's a hard pill to swallow because, again, we're artists and we put our value in the things we create. And when we're not creating, we think that that's reflective on us. We're not successful. We're not doing what we want to do. We're not making what we want to make. And at the end of the day, we're a failure for it. We have no purpose without it. But that's not true. It's not true. There's so much more to you than your art. And as artists, that's very hard to hear. It's hard for me to hear. It's hard for me to say. I also want to point out, going back to some of my previous points, I don't care about the money. I don't care about the success. I don't want money. I don't want success. I just want to make a good living doing what I want to do. And what I want to do is my art. What I want to do is make movies, or write or whatever you want to do. If you want to paint, if you can make a living painting, like I've told my friends 100 times, if I had the choice between making $2 million at a desk job and never doing film again versus making 60 grand a year, doing the thing I love and making movies for people to see in the theater or on Netflix or whatever, I'm taking the film job because it's fulfilling to me. But at the end of the day, you can't put your whole self-worth in it because you hear these stories all the time. I think this just happened actually to a rapper who unfortunately took his own life. And I could be wrong. I don't want to say that this is exactly what happened, but I've heard many horror stories about how a lot of artists, particularly rappers, but this is for everybody, they grow up idolizing the fame and the money and the status to the point where they work so hard to get it that once they get it, they don't know what to do with themselves anymore. You get the money, you get the fame, you get the status, you've achieved your goal, and then they sit on the mountaintop and they're like, the mountaintop that they've created, and they're like, what now? And a lot of times that's a depressing thing for them. It's depressing for them. And a lot of them turn to drugs or violence or whatever. And this is not just rappers. This is like any artist, really. Same thing with film directors. There are a lot of depressed film directors out there. A lot of other musicians that aren't rappers, the same thing. They turn to drugs and stuff because they don't feel fulfillment in what they do, even though they, quote unquote, achieved their dream. Which is why you always have to go and try to create new goals for yourself that will keep you from doing something like that will keep you stagnant. And it's a hard thing. It's very hard. Mental health is such a complex web of confusion and craziness that some people won't understand. But I feel like as artists, we feel. I know that's a very pretentious thing to say. As artists, we feel. We feel the universe. We feel the emotion. Your typical artist with the beret. But no, I feel like artists do feel a lot more than people who aren't kind of creatively minded. The right brain people, I think they feel more than the left brain people. Not necessarily saying that left brain people can't feel emotion. It's just like I feel like the right brain people, it's like 10 times heightened. So anyway, at the end of the day, don't let this podcast discourage you. I hope it inspires you. But at the same time, I understand that it's super hard and that this podcast is not going to fix your anxiety, your depression as a filmmaker or as any artist. It's not going to fix. It's not going to be the cure-all. So what's the point of this podcast? Well, the point of this podcast is to tell you guys that no matter what hardship you're going through, depression, anxiety, OCD, ADHD, anything, even physically, mentally, anything you have to go through, you're not alone. And at the end of the day, that's all I wanted to say. So thank you guys. I'll see you guys in episode 6. I don't know when I'm going to be posting that, but I will have a guest next time. So You guys have a good one. Please subscribe for more Kitchen Sink Podcast. We are on Spotify and YouTube. And yeah, check us out whenever you guys feel like it. Thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.